Welcome back, knitters. I'm Jana with Purl Together. Can you believe this is block 10? Halfway through the Norah's Vintage Afghan knit along. If you're just joining us for that, there's a link to the pattern down below. And you might want to watch the Afghan prep video before you just hop in the middle somewhere. You certainly can start wherever you like. But I would suggest watching the prep video first and, make sure you have the newest version of the pattern if you're actually printing it out. I believe version 7 is what we're currently using. So before we get started with the tutorial for this block, I want to give a big shout out to my newest patron, Linda Taylor. Thank you for pledging your support. If you're interested in becoming a patron, check out what I'm offering for rewards for your support each month over at patreon.com/purltogether. What I found about block 10 was it was really simple to knit. It was only 4-row chart repeat, and after the first time through, I was able to just carry on without even using the pattern. I think it's a good one for learning to read your knitting and learning to assess when you've done the cable crossover and how many rows you need to knit until the next row that occurs. I thought it was a really good pattern for that. So if you're new to chart reading, this is a good one to start with. All right, let's get started with the tutorial. This block begins in the same way as all the previous ones, where we have our 4 stitches of garter, our 4 rows of garter stitch, and then the 5th row is alternating purls and knits, and then we have 4 more rows of garter stitch. Now I'm beginning row 10, which is our increase row, same as all the other blocks that we've done so far. And the increase row indicates that we're going to knit one, make one first. And as before, I'll go ahead and show you how I'm doing that with the pattern. So I just knit one, and then I'm lifting the center bar, putting it up on the left-hand needle and knitting it into the back. Now, if you have trouble or your needles are maybe not as pointy as mine, and they don't want to go into the back quite that easily, you can kind of do this little rolling maneuver to get your other needle in the front instead. So after you knit one, make one, we're going to knit 2 and make one again. So again, you're going to find the bar, the horizontal strand between, lift that up on the other needle, and knit into the back of that. So knit 2, make 1 all the way across, and you should end up with 88 stitches total. Now I always double count. I'm sure you do as well. You see I lifted that wrong, and I wanted to knit in the back of that. And the point of that is to twist that, not only so it keeps it looking like a purl stitch, but it also helps to close that gap there and mitigate any potential or noticeable holes. So again, lift up that strand and knit into the back all the way across, and you should have 88 stitches when you're done. All right, I have double counted that I do in fact have 88 stitches. And before we continue, I'm going to go over a couple of things on the chart as I usually do. So if you're just joining us, you might find this helpful, and if you have done all other 9 blocks with me, feel free to skip ahead. So what we notice here on the notes is that on the right side, we're going to begin at A, and work to letter C. Then we're just going to repeat what's in between these red lines, working from B to C, and then at the last, go all the way to D when you only have 2 stitches left. So keep in mind that the squares are knit on the right side, purling on the wrong side, and so then it's opposite when you turn your work. And when you work back and forth, knitting back and forth, reading the chart, we knit across one side and go up, knit across the other side and go up. Now with this particular chart, we are starting on the wrong side. We're not, or what will become very apparent to be the wrong side with the chart. So row 1, we're starting over here, and we're working this way. Then we're going to go up, and if you'll notice, all the cabling will be done on the even rows, 2 and 4. So we're just going to work through this chart. I think the pattern indicates 17 times. So this is going to be super easy. It's just 2 over 2 cables, leaning to the right and leaning to the left. So I'll get started, and then I'll show you those cables, how I like to work them without a cable needle. You do it with a cable needle if you like, but this is going to be a quick block and these are super simple. All right, I've knitted the first row here with just knits and purls across, making sure to repeat between the red lines until you get to the end. Now we're going to start row 2. If you'll notice, there's a little bit of a selvage edge here that's garter stitch, so alternating knits and purls up the edge, so just be mindful of that. And we're going to start right off, knit 1, purl 1, and then a 2x2 cable to the right. So let me show you how I do that. without a cable needle. So you're just going to knit one, purl one right off the bat. I give that a good little tug. I don't like the selvage edge to be too sloppy. And now a 2x2 to the right. Now if you're using a cable needle, just simply follow those instructions where you slip 2 and hold them to the back. But if you're not, these are the 2 you would normally slip and you would hold those to the back. So we're just going to go in under the next 2, underneath those stitches. And when I slip out my left needle, these 2 here are going to come free. So I'm pinching them against the back of the needle while I do that. And then I'm going to go and hurry and put my left needle right back in. And then I can pull these 2 across the front and replace them on the left needle. So all we've done is switch the order of those 2, creating that cable. And then I'm just going to knit right across them as indicated by the pattern. So you just knit 2 and then you would knit 2 from the cable needle. And that's really all there is to it. This is going to be a really straightforward, fast block to knit. Okay, in just a moment I'll show you that 2x2 to the right cable again. We just knit through this part real quick. 2 purls. Now again, this is 2x2 to the right, so if you had a cable needle, you'd slip these 2 off. I'm just going to go right in underneath those 2. Press the 2 that need to stay in the back against the back of my right hand needle, slip the left needle out, and just replace those on there, pulling these other 2 across the front. And then since we've reversed, or not reversed, but since we've changed the order of those, I'm just going to knit right across them, being careful not to split anything. And then carry on repeating this section between the red lines. Now often when you go from a cable to a purl, you'll have sometimes a little ladder that will form here between the cable and the purl, and that's because of the extra yarn required to make that purl stitch. So I just like to give that a quick little tug to mitigate any laddering effects that might happen. All right, so I finished knitting across row 2 and doing all those 2/2 leaning to the right cables, and then I just went back on row 3, purl the purls and knit the knits, with the exception of that first selvage edge. You know, this very first stitch that you need to be mindful of its alternation. Now what I've done on row 4 is just knitted the first little bit there up to our first cable, which is the blue icon, and that indicates you want to slip 2 stitches onto a cable needle and hold it to the front. But since I'm doing it without a cable needle, normally I would slip these 2 and hold them to the front, but instead I'm going to take my right hand needle back behind and go in right underneath those stitches there at the base. And you just double check that you're not going into the bottom of either of these first 2 stitches. And then I just do the exact opposite of what we did before. So I'm pressing those to the base of my right hand needle, slip your left needle out and bring that right around and catch those again, so that this cable is leaning to the left. So we're just pulling those across and replacing these 2 back on the left. So we're trading places with them. And there's not even any purls involved in this block. This is, or at least these cables involved in this block. So this is super simple. And if you'll notice, you only have things to do on rows 2 and 4. And sometimes you're doing the little cables and sometimes you're doing the center panel that has 8 stitches. So these 2 are going to lean to the middle. These are going to lean to the middle as well. So these are the exact same ones we've been doing already. We're just going to go into the front at the base, waiting for the camera to focus. Okay, press those 2 to the back of the needle. Take out the left needle and put it right back in. So that's going to create that cable that leans to the center of this 8-stitch panel. And then we're just going to carry on like that across this whole row, and that's it. So I'm going to knit through this chart several times, and when I'm, I don't know, half to 2/3 through, I'll show you what it looks like. All right, this block's coming along really well. You can see how it is a little bit busy, but I really like the texture about it. And the other thing I think that this block is really helpful for is if you're learning how to read your knitting, it's a really good chart to be able to practice not even using the chart. So you can totally tell that you start the chart, for example, with this cable 2/2 to the right. And you can tell that this row right here is where we crossed over. And then you have 1, 2, 3 plain rows, and now it's time to do this one again. So if you can practice learning to read your knitting, it definitely makes your time a little more efficient if you're not having to look back and forth as much. And it's just good to be able to know if you've made a mistake. So I have done, I believe, 13 repeats, and all I did there was count these ridges up because there's only one of those per chart. And then we'll carry on. I've worked through the chart the 17 times and then just knitted row 1 once again. And so now I'm ready for the decrease row because we had those 88 stitches. We need to get back down to our original cast on number. So if you'll notice, the pattern indicates that we just want to knit 1 and then knit 1, knit 2 together 29 times so that we're back down to our original 59 stitches. So that's easy enough to do. You'll just want to double count when you're finished and make sure that you have the required stitches. Then we're just going to carry on doing rows 1 through 9 as we did when we began the square, those 4 rows of garter stitch. Row 5 is the alternating knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and then 4 more rows of garter stitch, and then our regular bind off. Okay, and that's block 10. I would love to see your photos of block 10 in the Facebook group or the Ravelry group. What I like about the Ravelry group is that the threads are separated out, so it's really easy to see when there's a new post on each particular thread. So head over there and check out everybody's photos, post your own. I'd really like to see how things are going for you. Block 11 looks to be pretty straightforward as well, although the cables will be significantly bigger. So if you haven't been using a cable needle, you might want to grab one for block 11. So till next time, happy knitting.